My name is Ashley, and I'm 27 years old. I was an only child raised by a calm and doting father and a lively, energetic mother. Their marriage was harmonious and joyful, even if Mom could be a bit too spirited at times. In fact, I got married wanting the kind of marriage life they led. Judson is my husband, who I met through a friend. Both my family and Judson's are in the food industry, but his family owns a popular French restaurant. They've achieved great success, operating several outlets in and around New York City. As the heir to the family business, Judson was involved in its operations. While we were dating, his anecdotes about the restaurant and his ambitions were entertaining. However, after marriage, I started to feel a twinge of annoyance whenever my family's business was compared to his. Running a famous restaurant is tough, unlike your family's business, which seems like it's about to go under. Arguing back was exhausting. My family's restaurant was not on the brink of closure, and if I may say so, it was not Judson who was sustaining his family's business. It was Todd. Todd was Judson's cousin from his mother's side. Orphaned as a child, he was taken in by Judson's family. Judson initially referred to Todd as a brother, but in reality, he treated him like a slave. The reason Judson's family business didn't fail was thanks to Todd's competence and his mother. Observing their family business as a daughter-in-law, it was clear that my father-in-law and Judson were simply arrogant. Without Todd and my mother-in-law, Judson's family business would undoubtedly go bankrupt. Their attitudes towards Todd and my mother-in-law, who were the ones contributing, were arrogant. Judson's logic was that since he had saved Todd from being an orphan, it was only natural that Todd should repay the favor. According to my father-in-law, since my mother-in-law was his wife, it was natural for her to serve him. In other words, they were both just pawns to them. Unlike the haughty father-in-law and Judson, my mother-in-law and Todd were kind. After graduating from college at 24, Todd took on a secretary-like role to Judson. My mother-in-law spoke to me, her face filled with sorrow. Todd would have been happier if he had been taken in by other relatives. My husband forcibly adopted him because Todd seemed useful to him. The kind-hearted mother-in-law was worried about Todd. However, she was frustrated that she couldn't openly defend him in front of her husband and Judson. Despite being the heir, Judson was incompetent. That's why he found Todd's competence irritating and was harsh towards him. He often complained about the employees and Todd to me. The employees only follow Todd's instructions. Well, if things go well when Todd gets involved, I think that's fine. The employees know what they need for themselves too. They show reluctance to follow Judson's orders because they have complaints against him. Todd was struggling to make the employees accept Judson's unreasonable instructions. In fact, Todd and my mother-in-law rarely voiced their opinions. They obediently followed the orders of my father-in-law and Judson. But behind the scenes, they were reworking the foolish strategies of my father-in-law and Judson into appropriate instructions. They were desperately making sure the business didn't fail while saving face for my father-in-law and Judson. That's why the employees respected Todd and my mother-in-law. Since getting married, I've observed Judson, my in-laws, and Todd and came to a realization. My mother-in-law and Todd were wise and competent. They knew that insisting on their way would cause chaos around them. They were gaining the trust of the employees while preserving the dignity of my father-in-law and Judson. On the contrary, my father-in-law and Judson were ignorant and incompetent. They didn't realize that their positions were secured only thanks to the competent people around them. If they were a little smarter, they would cherish my mother-in-law and Todd. They believed they were more competent than anyone else because they were at the top. They looked down on those around them because they overestimated their own abilities. I once told my parents about this when I visited my hometown. My mother sat drinking her loaded potato soup. "Ashley, just get a divorce and come home." My father gave a bitter smile at my mother's active encouragement of my divorce. It was too soon to talk about divorce as we hadn't even been married for half a year. I was disappointed in Judson and my father-in-law, but my mother-in-law and Todd were good people. I can't just easily get a divorce, I thought, giving a bitter smile. My dad gave a gentle nod, but my mom, sipping her second bowl of pizza soup, suggested, Well, why don't you get a divorce, marry Todd, and come help us out at our pizza shop? Mom, don't say such weird things, I protested heatedly, to which my dad kindly asked, Ashley, are you troubled about something? I sighed at my dad's question. He's gentle but sharp. I gave up and began talking about my issues with Judson. Judson is really a handful. Judson looks down on me, seeing me as just a daughter of a shabby pizza shop owner. That alone is irritating, but there were more problems. Just because I talk with Todd, he suspects me of cheating. Neither Todd nor I have such feelings. Todd is basically a brother-in-law to me. When I discussed it with my mother-in-law, she gave a deep sigh. According to my mother-in-law, there's a female employee Judson was interested in the past. However, that woman admired and liked Todd. Judson, angered, came up with a random excuse and fired her. It may sound rude to you, Ashley, but Judson hates losing to Todd. It was not jealousy, but a distorted sense of competition. Therefore, Todd knows to keep his conversations with me to a minimum. I'm fed up with Judson's selfishness, but Todd, who works closely with me, must be even more exhausted. When I talked about Judson's troublesome personality, my mother made a dumbfounded face. What a petty man. He's too insecure. Don't you think so, honey? Yes, indeed. Talking with my mom and dad like this seemed to dissipate my gloomy mood. My mom has been spirited since she was a child, and my late grandfather had difficulty finding a suitable match for her. She was beautiful and a popular girl in town, but she was too energetic. Since she was the eldest daughter, her family needed a son-in-law to succeed her family business. The men my grandfather introduced to her shrank back from her overly energetic demeanor. My grandfather thought a gentle man would be suitable for his active daughter, and so the arrow pointed to my father. He was the son of my grandfather's close friend, well known for his gentleness and intelligence. When they had their first meeting, it was my mom who fell for my dad. According to my mom, my dad looked like a handsome actor when he was young. Even now, he's known as a refined man by the customers of our pizza shop. My dad, attracted to my mom's lively personality, decided to marry her. As my parents chatted amiably, I remembered an important matter. Can I bring Judson, my father-in-law, my mother-in-law, and Todd here next time? It was the first time for my in-laws and Todd to visit my parents' home. My mother-in-law wanted to greet my parents again, which is why she asked. My father-in-law and Judson reluctantly agreed. Surprisingly, Todd, interested in making pizza, volunteered to come. My guess is that Todd was concerned that my father-in-law and Judson might behave rudely. My parents were pleased to grant my request. Of course, we'll make them realize how delicious our pizza is. Mom, you're getting too excited. That's how I ended up bringing my in-laws to my parents' pizza shop. I hadn't expected a battleground to lie ahead. Well, actually, I had a nagging feeling something unpleasant was coming. Todd usually steps in when my mother-in-law can't control my father-in-law and Judson. It was certain that a storm was brewing. And then, the day came when we all visited my parents' pizza shop. The moment Judson saw my family's pizza shop, he sneered. Still as old-fashioned as ever. It was fortunate that my mother wasn't present in that moment. If she had heard him, Judson would have been banned from our shop right there. As I ignored him and went into the shop, my mom was waiting cheerfully. Welcome, everyone. Long time no see, Judson. Ashley told me a lot about you. She didn't mean it in a good way, though, but I guess Judson didn't get her sarcasm. I don't know what Judson misunderstood, but he looked very flattered. My in-laws didn't get it, but it seemed that Todd did. He was smiling as if he understood the hidden meaning in my mom's words. It was rare for Todd to show his emotions. After my mother had greeted Judson and my in-laws, she turned to Todd. You're Todd, right? So tall and handsome, you look like a model. Overwhelmed by my mother's forcefulness, Todd showed a puzzled smile. Thank you. I'm looking forward to today. He shook her hand politely and headed towards the room where Todd and my in-laws were. My father was in the process of making pizza. When my mother tried to bring out some drinks and our popular side dishes, my father-in-law scoffed. Both the store and your mother are old and dirty. I was both angry and chilled. As I looked, my mom was preparing drinks right in front of me. To be honest, I was too terrified to look directly at my mother's face. As I swallowed my fear, I heard a menacing voice. "Say that again?" My normally cheerful mother's voice, laden with quiet anger, was terrifying. Even though my mother-in-law and Todd tried to stop him, my father-in-law spoke again. "Both the store and the old woman running this place are filthy. I think I'm going to get food poisoning." My father-in-law's outrageous words were met with Judson's smirking agreement. My furious mother quietly put away the prepared drinks and brought out a 1-liter bottle of wine. She then sharply said to my father-in-law, "Hey, if you don't want your head split open like a watermelon, get out." My father-in-law was taken aback by her forcefulness, but managed to get out a parting shot. Just like the daughter, the mother is also ugly." As my mother started to swing the 1-liter bottle, my father rushed to stop her. My father tried to defuse the situation with a smile, but it was too late. My father-in-law and Judson spat at the entrance of the shop and left. My mom tried to chase after them, but my father and I desperately held her back. "How dare you call me an old woman? Call me miss!" "Mom, that's not what you're supposed to be angry about." Well, everything he said did piss me off, too. As my father and I desperately tried to calm her down, my mom finally calmed down a bit. My mother-in-law and Todd were profusely apologetic, but these two didn't need to apologize. The problem was my father-in-law's and Judson's condescending attitudes. The whole incident was caused by my father-in-law's derogatory comments about my family's home and Judson's amusement at them. I, too, was seething with anger over the heartless insults. My mother-in-law, noticing my state, spoke to me. "Ashley, I'm really sorry. My husband and Judson, they won't change. You can consider divorce for your own sake." Todd seemed to agree and added his own opinion quietly. "Sis, these incidents will continue. It would be best if you distance yourself." Seeing the regretful expressions on my mother-in-law and Todd's faces, I was conflicted. I could divorce, but I felt sorry for my mother-in-law and Todd. While my father and I were at a loss, my mother spoke up bluntly. "You two don't seem happy, especially Todd. You can leave whenever you want, right?" When my mother asked why he allowed himself to be used by a man like Judson, Todd looked at my mother-in-law. "I'm concerned about my aunt. I can't leave her after everything she's done for me." He felt no gratitude towards my father-in-law and Judson, but Todd was considerate of my mother-in-law. Additionally, he worried that if he left, the remaining employees would suffer due to the selfishness of my father-in-law and Judson. His concern for my mother-in-law and sense of responsibility were what held him back. Hearing Todd's true feelings, my mother-in-law began to cry. She felt guilty that Todd couldn't live freely because of her. As my father and I exchanged confused glances, not knowing what to do, my mother tapped Todd and my mother-in-law's shoulders. "Ha, that's easy. Leave it to me." My mother-in-law and Todd were taken aback by my mother's cheerful laughter. My father seemed to sense what my mother was going to do. I made up my mind too. After discussing what to do in the future, I returned home where Judson was waiting. The first thing I said to Judson was, "I'm cutting ties with your family." I declared our separation, unable to forgive my father-in-law's thoughtless words. Judson laughed scornfully, looking neither hurt nor bothered. He was a man incapable of contemplating an apology. "Huh, all right then, let's divorce." He insulted my family's pizza shop and seemed keen on divorce. I shoved the divorce papers I had prepared beforehand at him, and I gave him my final warning. "No matter what happens, don't come crying to me after our divorce." Judson, who didn't seem to understand the meaning, was nonchalant. "I'll pay you alimony, you poor pizza shop girl." I didn't need it, but I nodded so as not to arouse suspicion. And so just half a year later, Judson and I divorced. Excluding the presence of my mother-in-law and Todd, 80% of my life was stress. And with my father-in-law's thoughtless words, it became 100%. After the divorce, I returned to my parents' home. About a month later, my ex-father-in-law and ex-husband Judson came to me, pale-faced. "My wife and Todd are gone. They left divorce papers and a letter saying they were cutting ties with us." I told my ashen-faced ex-father-in-law. "How unfortunate. It's a late-life divorce, isn't it?" As I laughed, Judson, even more pale-faced, spoke up.
Employees who admired Todd quit. I got betrayed by my brother."
As I was astounded by his selfish remarks, a chilly voice rang out.
"Don't call me your brother only when it's convenient for you. I never considered you my brother."
Suddenly, Todd appeared, causing my ex-father-in-law and Judson to be utterly shocked. Then from the back, my former mother-in-law quietly emerged. While my ex-father-in-law and Judson were dumbfounded, my mother made a gallant appearance.
"These two have been scouted by us, and also we've taken over your French restaurant."
My ex-father-in-law broke out in cold sweat at my mother's declaration. My father, observing the situation, modestly smiled.
"It's nothing like that. Running a pizza shop was merely my hobby. My wife's family owns a group of restaurants, and they were kind enough to accept me as their son-in-law."
When he revealed the name of the company, my ex-father-in-law and Judson lost their footing, as they should have. Their restaurants were no match for the size of our company. There was a reason they had been running a pizza shop instead of being involved in the family business. A few years ago, my father had collapsed from overworking. Doctors suggested he should do something he enjoyed for his recovery. That's why my mother and I reopened this pizza shop my late grandfather used to run as a hobby. In other words, they just went undercover by running a pizza shop. During my parents' absence, their dedicated and skilled employees were running the company. My parents were actually overseeing their work while running the pizza shop. This was only possible because my parents were greatly admired by their staff. Under my mother's direction, our company took over the restaurant run by my ex-father-in-law and Judson. While they were complacent, the situation had changed. To the stunned ex-father-in-law and Judson, my father calmly said,
"Based on what I've seen, I've judged that you both lack the abilities to manage a business. The employees have also voiced their concerns with your management skills, so we demand your resignation."
Standing next to my father, who was gently issuing a terrifying announcement, my mother firmly said,
"We're leaving the management of the French restaurant to Todd. Todd, you can do whatever you want with these two. Stew them, roast them, crush them, you name it."
Ex-father-in-law Judson protested.
"You can't do that without our approval."
But it was futile. This was not just my parents' decision, but the will of all the employees who were upset with their boss, my ex-father-in-law and Judson. My ex-mother-in-law would now be in a supporting role for Todd, her nephew. In other words, Todd and my ex-mother-in-law now had the right to fire my ex-father-in-law and Judson. Todd exchanged glances with ex-mother-in-law and calmly said,
"I owe you for taking me in when I was a child."
My ex-father-in-law Judson had a moment of hope at Todd's kind smile, but it was fleeting. Todd changed his expression with an icy voice declared,
"But I have a grudge 100 billion times greater than that. For Judson, it's 500 billion times greater."
In short, he would neither forgive nor be merciful. Todd declared that he was stripping my ex-father-in-law Judson of all their managerial authority. Then, my ex-mother-in-law said something even more horrifying.
"I'd rather you vanish from my sight, but I'll keep you on as low-level workers."
Watching this spectacle, I felt a deep realization. People like my mother, who readily express their emotions, are actually much more predictable. Of course, my mother has her limits, but knowing when she'll act on her anger helps me stay mentally prepared. The most frightening are people like my ex-mother-in-law and Todd, who take on a lot of crap until it reaches their limit and goes off. The fact that they can bear insensitive words and deeds is proof of their strong core and kindness. My short-sighted ex-father-in-law and Judson had underestimated these two, and the situation had turned for the worst. It wasn't just the divorce with me, they had lost valuable human resources. Foolish people take for granted that kind people will forgive whatever they do. As a result, those who've reached their limit of patience have revolted, deemed unfit as managers, being turned away even by their close relatives. My ex-father-in-law and Judson were ousted. Working under Todd was humiliating for Judson, and he started crying. My ex-father-in-law yelled at Todd, calling him ungrateful, but it was too late. Although Todd holds a debt to gratitude, he harbors a grudge 100 billion times greater. Watching my ex-father-in-law Judson slink away in retreat, I said, "The mouth is indeed the gate of the evil." At my words, my father smiled.
"Angering your mother was the end of their luck."
As I observed my softly smiling father, I thought, it was him who went off, though. My father is a devoted husband to my mother, a man who would not hesitate to bring ruin upon those who dared to insult his beloved wife, all with a smile on his face. Afterward, my ex-father-in-law Judson disappeared, having received some severance pay. It must have been humiliating for them to work under my ex-mother-in-law and Todd's surveillance. Although they should have quit, they used their severance pay to start a new business, which ultimately failed. The French restaurant was actually expanded by my ex-father-in-law's parents. My ex-father-in-law never had the skills to expand his business. Now, my ex-mother-in-law and Todd are managing the French restaurant entrusted to them. They were excellent managers who gained the trust of their employees. Todd, always quiet, had gradually become more comfortable with expressing his emotions. After telling my parents that I wanted to enjoy working in the pizza restaurant for a bit longer, I continued to work in the food service industry, something I've done since before I was married. I worked together with my colleagues who I had known for some time. One day, on my day off, I went to my parents' pizza restaurant and saw my ex-mother-in-law there. She seemed to be consulting with my mother about something. I asked if anything had happened to my father, to which they informed me,
"Todd is about to turn 25. He's upset about being so focused on work and not having a girlfriend."
"You shouldn't have to worry about that." I sighed, but then heard my mother's lively voice. "There are countless girls who would want to marry a handsome and good man like Todd." I realized, then, that my mother was enthusiastic about introducing him to potential marriage prospects. But Todd might already have someone in mind. I was worried that they were being too forceful by arranging a meeting without asking him first. When I appealed to my father about it, he just smiled. Then I heard my mother calling me. Looking at my face, she smirked. "You've been listening to our conversation, right?" "Yes, I was, but Mom, you can't just set up a marriage meeting without asking Todd first." When I desperately objected, both my ex-mother-in-law and my mother laughed together. Feeling perplexed and unsure about what was happening, my ex-mother-in-law told me, "We know who Todd likes, but he just can't seem to say it himself." Then my mother continued, "Todd said he likes you, Ashley, but because you're like his sister-in-law, he feels hesitant." I was shocked because I hadn't noticed Todd's feelings. He's the type to keep things to himself, so much that I was completely unaware. Even though I thought he was a wonderful man, I didn't immediately feel any romantic feelings for him. When I shared my feelings honestly with my mother and my ex-mother-in-law, my father chimed in.
"It's okay. Todd said he'd take his time and gradually make you fall for him."
"Dad, I wish you kept that to yourself." At my outburst, both my mother and my ex-mother-in-law burst into laughter. And so, that's how I came to know that Todd was quietly nursing a one-sided love for me. I knew it would take forever for Todd to confess his feelings for me, so I asked him out first. Looking back, it was a clever strategy on Todd's part. Although we started off as a couple, I later asked him when he had started developing romantic feelings for me. At my question, Todd just smiled enigmatically. He never answered my question, but after 2 years of dating, we got married. In hindsight, my calm father and thoughtful Todd were quite similar. Only later did I laugh at the realization that my mom and I had similar tastes when it came to men.
"You're useless and don't work. I want a divorce." Where had the kind and charmingly smiling Neil from our courtship days gone? "I've been transferred. It's a nationwide bank, so I don't know when I'll be able to return here. That's why I want you to come with me." I had quit my longtime job to follow him, but honestly, there's no point in staying with this person anymore. Fine by me. Relieved to finally be divorced, I bought a lottery ticket and incredibly won a large sum. I've come to claim my $12 million prize. Just as I was about to reclaim a happy life with my $12 million, my ex-husband Neil caught wind of it. I saw right through Neil's intentions. I couldn't forgive his plans to take the money for himself, disregarding others. I was tired of being belittled by him, so I decided to fight back. I'm Mariah, a 35-year-old housewife. Since graduating high school, I had worked for about 10 years as a City Hall employee. I thought I'd retire there without much happening. Life changed when I met my husband, Neil. We met at a restaurant near the City Hall. It's a sizable place with a vast menu, popular for meals after meetings or completing significant tasks. That day, having finished chairing a meeting, I decided to treat myself to a nice lunch there alone. What's recommended here? A man stood in front of the restaurant, perplexed by the menu. With its extensive options and colorful displays inside, it's common to see people deliberating over their choices. I was drawn to this man, indecisively tracing his finger over the popular recommended and manager special signs. Normally, I'd walk past, but I found myself speaking to him. If you're here, I recommend the chicken Neapolitan. It's deliciously sweet and spicy. Chicken Neapolitan? Is that on the menu? Yes, the mix of chicken and Neapolitan ketchup is really tasty. Then I guess I'll try that. His smile when he said that was so charming, I was captivated. At first, he seemed like a capable businessman, but his smile had a boyish quality. That keychain. Oh, this? Got into it because of my sister. Just went to their concert recently. The one just the other day? I was there too. It was amazing, right? We hit it off over our shared love for the artist and unexpectedly ended up having lunch together. Familiar with the restaurant and it being lunchtime, our short conversation was enjoyable. I felt a sense of fulfillment. Not enough even for a lunch break. It seemed Neil felt the same way as he approached me when leaving. If you don't mind, I'd like to see you again. Could we exchange contact information? Living my usual life in the usual place, I never expected such a dramatic turn of events. Could something like this really happen outside of a drama? Despite my doubts, we exchanged numbers. I wanted to talk more, and it was exciting to share such enthusiasm with someone. Afterward, we started going out for meals and attending events together. Our relationship naturally progressed, leading to dating and eventually marriage. We got married when I was 33 and Neil was 34. I wanted to cherish the happiness of being with Neil, but life doesn't always go as planned. Mariah, I need to talk to you. Neil came home with a troubled look. What's wrong? Come on, let's eat. I've been transferred. I had to tell you as soon as possible. I couldn't wrap my head around it suddenly. Transferred? What do you mean? They said with my promotion, I should go see the world outside, and I can't really refuse. Though surprised, part of me understood. After all, Neil was a banker. His bank has branches all over, so I knew transfers were part of the job. I had braced myself for this, but Neil's words and expression concerned me. Would a normal transfer make him look so down? Wait, what do you mean by the outside world? Is there something hard to tell? Actually, I'm being transferred to Boston. They want me to train at a branch there. What? Boston so suddenly? I knew that as a banker, Neil might have to relocate, but Boston of all places? We lived in a provincial city, so Boston was quite a distance away. We had discussed what we'd do if you were transferred before we got married. I had expressed my preference for him to go alone if that happened. But now, Neil was suggesting we break that promise. Please, Mariah, I want you to come with me. Wait, I have my job here too. I fully understand it's hard, but I can't bear to be apart from you. You want me to quit my job and move to Boston? We might return here in a few years. What about going to Boston alone till then? Neil hesitantly responded. I thought about that, but our bank has branches nationwide, so there's no guarantee we'll come back here. This is so sudden. Being transferred to Boston means I'm on the fast track to success. It'll make things easier for you, Mariah. Neil then pleaded with his hands clasped as if in prayer. I know it's a lot to ask you to quit your job suddenly, but I hate the idea of going alone. I'll work desperately hard on this career path, so please, come with me. I couldn't refuse after such a plea. Honestly, the thought of Neil transferring alone and how it would affect our lives worried me. We had discussed wanting children soon, so living apart seemed impractical. All right, I'll go with you, Neil, but you have to work hard, okay? Thank you. I'll do my best. I'll become a branch manager and make life easier for you, Mariah. I wish I could have told myself back then. I wish I could tell myself then not to go with him on the transfer. In Boston, Neil seemed like he had changed. He became a work-first person, or perhaps it was mostly the loss of his smile that made him seem different. Welcome home. Ready for dinner? Huh? Can't you see how tired I am? No way I can eat. He would go straight to the bedroom, looking as if he might collapse, his face expressionless. Mornings came too early for him, and days without a morning greeting continued. Neil, you look pale. Are you okay? I hadn't seen his smile in a long time. We barely ate together, and he usually came home after midnight. Although I heard weekends were generally free, he was hardly ever at home. Even when home, he'd stay in the bedroom shut away. It felt like living alone. I started to wonder about the point of quitting my job to follow him to Boston. Maybe I should have insisted on him going alone. But no matter how much I regret it, there's nothing I can do. I need to find something to do for myself. Just passing the days aimlessly would be such a waste. Then one day, I got an idea when I saw a flyer in the mailbox. If I'm going to be at home all the time, I might as well start working. So I applied for a job at a nearby cafe that was hiring. Fortunately, I got the job right away. Having only done office work before, everything about this job was new and exciting to me. And above all, seeing the customer smiles up close was delightful. The cafe where I worked is known for its latte art, and people come from all around to see the owner's creations. I thought how fun it would be if I could make such beautiful latte art myself. Working at this cafe in Boston, I found a new joy. In my free time, I learned latte art from the manager, spending fulfilling days. Gradually, I started thinking about how nice it would be to do something professionally with latte art. It was around this time that I began to ponder starting my own business. I dreamt of how fun it would be to have my own shop and spread the joy of latte art. These fantasies were my escape from the growing disconnect with Neil. Gradually, this escapism turned into a solid goal, and I started researching what it would take to own my own shop. But that wasn't all. Maybe I should try my luck. Around this time, I started buying lottery tickets. Working at the cafe was fun every day, and I earned my own money. I thought everything was great, but Neil didn't seem to think so. One day, while I was practicing latte art on my day off, Neil spoke to me in a bad mood. Hey, what's with you lately, Mariah? What do you mean? Is something wrong? No, it's just, you're always playing around, neglecting the housework. There's dust everywhere, and you haven't prepared meals. Of course, I did what I needed to do before going to work part-time or practicing latte art. I used to make breakfast and dinner for Neil, but he often came home late at night and skipped dinner. Lately, he would leave for work without eating breakfast, so I stopped preparing it. Neil, you hardly eat at home these days. That's not the point, is it? Are you just making excuses because you don't want to do it? He never used to speak so oppressively. Since moving to Boston, he seemed like a changed person. And what's with the cafe and latte art? Isn't it embarrassing as a banker's wife? And you talk about wanting kids, but you don't even cook proper meals. Isn't that failing as a wife? I was actually visiting the doctor between part-time hours, but it turns out there's nothing wrong with me. I don't appreciate being accused of running off to play. And about the child, the doctor said there was nothing wrong with me and asked to see you next time. When can you go, Neil? Then Neil suddenly shouted and raised his hand. What? Are you saying it's my fault? I didn't say that. The doctor just asked when you could come in for a check. I've told you, I'm busy with work. It's not like you playing with coffee. Don't lump us together. I couldn't believe Neil would say such things. Where had the Neil who used to smile gone? Since coming to Boston, he really had changed. I feel sick. I'm going to work. Wait, Isn't today your day off? And it's already evening. There's something I need to finish. It's none of your business. He left, but he didn't look like he was going to work. He was in casual clothes and sprayed cologne 2 or 3 times before leaving. Wait, do you always wear cologne? My casual question was met with a glare from Neil. His frequent rushes out of the house, mood swings, and taking it out on me were becoming too much. Honestly, I wanted to build a good relationship with Neil. Living in an unfamiliar place, he's my only family, so I want to support and help each other. But I realized Neil's view of me had drastically changed. I wanted to have a proper conversation about it. If he's unhappy with me, I want to fix it. Hey, can we talk for a minute? That's good timing. I have something to say, too. I wondered what he wanted to talk about. With that thought, I sat down on the living room chair. When was the last time Neil and I sat face to face in these chairs? Lately, it feels like we haven't even looked at each other properly. So, what did you want to talk about? Don't you already know? What do you mean? You're so oblivious. That's why you can't get a decent job. I decided to overlook Neil's comments about me for now, but I couldn't tolerate his belittling the job I loved. Whatever job you have, it's wrong to mock someone else's work, especially if they love it. I had resisted moving to a new place for Neil's transfer, but here I found a passion for latte art and a dream to base my life around it. Neil carelessly trampled on that dream. I wanted to own a shop and make latte art my profession. I couldn't stay silent when my first self-discovered dream was ridiculed. What? Work? Calling that playtime a job is more embarrassing. It's just like playing house, not real work. Enough. What do you want to say? Then Neil, with a laugh, put a green paper in front of me. The useless, jobless one gets a divorce. He handed me divorce papers. Divorce papers? Yes, you're just living off me without working. Remember your place, compared to mine. So that's the kind of person you are. I'm too busy with work to support a parasite like you. What? Did he think I would beg not to divorce? I stood there, holding the divorce papers. My silence while holding the divorce papers must be disappointing to him. He became increasingly irritated. Of course you don't want to write. A high school grad like you can't work properly outside, can you? What should I do with this? Hurry up. Your slowness is just like a woman who can't work. He seemed desperate to get divorced as soon as possible. Neil, filled with impatience, started fidgeting nervously. While tapping his foot, he glared at me as if urging me to hurry. This man was no longer the Neil I had once loved so dearly. Why did I fall for someone like this? And why did I come so far away with him, to a place where I knew no one? Now I only have regrets. The one thing I needed to do was clear. Faced with Neil's provocative attitude, I responded brightly. Okay. Really? Remember, you can't change your mind later. I won't. You're the one who brought these papers because you wanted a divorce, right? I'm tired of living every day trying to gauge Neil's mood. I signed the divorce papers with a smile and told Neil, I'll file these papers myself. You better do it. I'll know if you do anything strange. Stop it. If I say I'll do it, I will. Don't worry. After filing the divorce papers and finally being free, I decided to check my lottery ticket to see what the future held. I went to the familiar lottery kiosk, chatted with the lady at the counter, and handed her my ticket. She scanned it and suddenly let out a strange sound, disappearing from view. She had fallen off her chair in shock. I was startled at first, but then I saw an unbelievable number on the small display, along with the words, "Congratulations." What? $12 million? I was so shocked I couldn't speak. This was a promising restart. With this amount of money, my dream of owning my shop was now within reach. I went to the bank where my ex-husband worked to cash it in. There was no particular intention in choosing that bank. It just so happened that the bank where he worked was nearby. I never expected that visiting this bank would significantly change my situation. I rushed to the bank just before closing time to cash in my lottery ticket, feeling nervous about holding on to it for too long. As I was waiting after checking in, a woman approached me. "Why are you here? What brings you to a place like this?" Her tone was unexpectedly rude. "Well, it's not any really specific business." "Why did you even bother coming here?" "Why do you keep saying bother? Just please take care of this." What's this?" She looked curiously at the lottery ticket in my hand. "I came to cash it in." "Cash in? You bought a lottery ticket with your husband's money? How extravagant." The bank was crowded, so it's likely no one else heard the woman's rude words unless they were very close. People passed by without a second glance. It was unbelievable that such a rude employee existed, but I decided to quickly finish my business and leave. "I'm here to claim my $12 million. Her relaxed demeanor instantly changed to one of intense scrutiny. $12 million? Her loud exclamation startled me. Then, without a word, she disappeared into a back room. I was taken to the manager's office due to the significant amount of the prize. The procedure to collect the $12 million went smoothly, but I couldn't stop thinking about that extremely rude bank employee. Her disdainful look made me feel uncomfortable. As soon as I got home, I opened my laptop. Neil's Bank, through a national chain, had a blog for each branch detailing daily events and promotions. I was sure I could find something about that rude employee. Browsing the blog, I discovered her name. With her name known, the situation was in my hands. While I was researching the woman on the blog, I received a message. It was from Neil, asking if we could meet tonight. Honestly, after filing for divorce and considering him a stranger now, I saw no need to meet, but I decided to oblige. Neil's pride must have made contacting me a humiliating ordeal. His message was full of condescension, saying things like, "I thought you'd be lonely, so I'll meet you." Or, "I figured you'd had enough of living alone." I was furious inside, but wanted to settle things, so I agreed to meet at a cafe. When we met outside, Neil immediately started talking upon seeing me. "Hey, shouldn't we give it another try? I've been thinking a lot since then." "Give it another try?" "Yeah, I was angry back then, and said things I didn't mean." "So you want to start over with me?" Looking at me, Neil continued. "Yes, we've had our misunderstandings, but I believe we can still become a great couple." Watching Neil, clearly intoxicated with his own words, I decided to settle this. "If you insist, maybe we could give it another try." That's the Mariah I know. "Did you really think I'd say that?" Neil looked at me shocked, so I decided to enlighten him. "I'm glad we're divorced. You wanted to reconcile for the money, right?" "Money? What are you talking about?" "Don't play dumb. You thought about keeping it all for yourself, didn't you?" Neil leaned forward across the table, pleading. "No, of course not. And $12 million is a lot of money, perfect for buying a house and starting anew." "I never mentioned $12 million, did I?" Neil finally realized his mistake and covered his mouth, but it was too late. He had already let it slip, and covering his mouth in a panic, couldn't undo what had been said. "You had an affair, found your wife bothersome, so you decided to divorce, and now you want to remarry for money? Don't make me laugh." "No, it's not the money, it's just that..." "Do you even realize what you're doing and saying?" Neil was visibly uncomfortable and restless. "So you heard it from that woman, Rebecca, right?" "What? What are you talking about?" "I know you two are dating. You thought if we got back together, you could buy Rebecca even more gifts, right?" Despite the cold season, Neil was sweating. "Did you really think you could fool me with such a trivial excuse?" I showed Neil the photo I was holding. I thought something was odd when I visited the bank. Then this very rude woman approached me. I found her distasteful, but she turned out to be your girlfriend. The photo I was holding was of Neil and Rebecca standing together. They didn't look like mere colleagues, but rather like a couple standing close to each other. To claim they were just workplace acquaintances would be quite a stretch. If he was trying to pass off that implausibility, he really needed to think again. I work at a cafe that turns into a bar at night, and I was surprised to see you two on a date there. I heard about it from the owner and colleagues, but I couldn't believe it. Well, I asked the owner, and apparently, you two have been coming there occasionally for about 2 years. My hand holding the photo was trembling. I had only worked part-time during the day, waiting for your return, but you were cheating and planning to leave me for the younger, beautiful Rebecca, weren't you? Neil had no response, looking down. But then, I won the lottery, and you changed your mind, right? He looked at me guiltily. So you thought if you withdrew the divorce, you could squeeze money out of me as your husband? That's right. Money is a shared marital asset, right? I've been living with you for years, so if we got back together, it would still be shared property. Wait, are you serious? I sighed at Neil's words. How could he have the nerve to propose reconciliation after he was the one who initiated the divorce? Sure, I have the lottery ticket, and I won a substantial amount, but I bought it after we filed for divorce. What? What does that mean? Be clear. It means it's not the subject to property distribution. I've already checked with a lawyer. Neil looked at me with a resentful expression. You can't be serious. You initiate the divorce, and when I come into a significant amount of money, you think we can just get back together? I never said that. But that's the reality, right? I heard it. I operated my mobile phone. What played was a recording. From the background noise, I could hear Neil and Rebecca's conversation. They talked about my $12 million win, and how getting the money before divorcing would make buying a house a reality. The woman's excited voice in the conversation was notable. This is from when you were talking at the bar. How did you get this? I was recording a video, and your conversation accidentally got recorded. So you were planning to take my $12 million win and enjoy it with your mistress, right? Because it's not fair for you alone to be so lucky. You just play around at the cafe and then get a fortune? And you can't forgive me for 1 or 2 affairs? From my point of view, it's you who's out of line, always playing around. I couldn't understand how my part-time job and Neil's affairs could be compared, but I decided to settle this matter once and for all. All I wanted to say was about that fact. This branch? It had some colleagues who attended our wedding, right? The world is really small. So, what if a colleague was there? What does it have to do with you? I showed them the video because they wanted to see it. They're interested in flair bartending. Oh, and by the way, the video includes your conversation. Then, Neil stood up from his chair with a loud noise. He stood up so abruptly that the chair toppled over, making a loud crashing sound. Hey, what are you thinking showing that to a colleague? They wanted to see it, so why not? What are you doing to me? Holding his head, Neil crouched down. It was understandable. One of Neil's colleagues, who attended our wedding, was rumored to become a manager. Being noticed by this colleague meant getting off the promotion track. All my efforts, up to this point, and to be discovered by that guy of all people. You thought it would be fine, as long as it wasn't discovered, right? Neil ended up far off the promotion track, now relegated to a teller dealing with shredding duties. Overtaken by his juniors and regarded as a nuisance at the bank. But that was their own responsibility. They chose the path that led them here, so they should accept the consequences. Rebecca was called by her boss and told that resignation was her only option. Rebecca reportedly insisted, I really don't want to resign. But once her affair was exposed so publicly, she had no choice but to resign. Eventually, she resigned. Rebecca, it seems, was the kind of person who couldn't do her job well. She couldn't understand instructions, did sloppy work, and essentially couldn't do anything, resulting in her not getting any job offers, even though she was registered with the temp agency. After the divorce, it seemed they blamed each other. I continued to practice latte art and decided to go independent. I was unsure about starting my own business, but the cafe owner was very helpful with various consultations. Thanks to the owner's kindness, I was able to open a new cafe. I had been doing administrative work at City Hall since high school graduation. However, following the transfer and discovering the fascinating work of latte art was a stroke of luck. If Neil had gone on his transfer alone, I likely would have never encountered latte art. There were certain nights at first, but thanks to word of mouth and magazine features, the cafe did well. I never dreamed of owning my own shop, so it's true that you never know what life will bring. That's what makes life interesting. Being able to enrich my days with something I love is truly fulfilling. Such modest happiness brings me great joy.